All right, so we're changing topics completely. And this is basically a sequel to the talk I gave last time, which I gave for a colleague who actually got sick. So he was talking about time travel, so I gave that talk. I'm a physicist, so Sascha Vogel is my name, and I'm a theoretical physicist by training. After a couple of stops in academia, just like 5-6 years ago, I started a company on science communication and talking about science in Hollywood and stuff like that. So, and one of the things I quite recently rediscovered, so I played Warhammer Fantasy when I was young and rediscovered Warhammer 40k somewhat recently. So I still have to catch up a lot on the lore and so on. However, one piece that came up in the talk last time is that there is an actual example of time travel in, a famous example in the history in Warhammer 40k on time travel, which is Warlord Grizgutz. Just out of curiosity, does anybody know Warlord Grizgutz?
Very interesting.
Say again?
Hate the model.
Say again?
Hate the model.
Hate the model, okay. Do you know the story of Warlord Grizgutz?
Basically hate the model.
Okay, but do you know the story of Grizgutz? No. You know? Okay, then, story time. We call it Grizgutz Adventures. And I quickly want to introduce Grizgutz, I want to introduce time travel, tell you why it doesn't work, and then tell you how it works. So that's the idea. First and foremost, this talk is all about heresy. We used artificial intelligence to generate a couple of images or blatantly stole them from somewhere else, which is mostly Lexicon and Fandom. So you know the sources, heretical pictures. Yeah. So who is this Warlord Grizgutz? And this is a picture of Grizgutz. And there are a couple. There even Magic the Gathering cards on Grizgutz, which is called Grizgutz the Time Traveler, which is very lore accurate if you know the story. There are other pictures. However, there is only one official mentioning of Warlord Grizgutz in the whole canon, which is the 4th edition codex of the Orcs. And the Korean Tide, you have all the various VARs. And this here, and I don't know whether you can read it here in the room, I have it slightly larger later on. This tiny piece of text is the only official mentioning of Grizgutz in the whole lore. He doesn't appear, at least all I could find, I used a couple of large language models to scan everything. There is no other official mention. This tiny thing reads, this one. It's, we are in the year 978.m41, the Lost War. This is basically the text we just saw, just bigger. The Orc Warlord Grizgutz, a noted kleptomaniac, launches his war into the Morlock system, which also doesn't have any mention I could find. So it's a completely irrelevant system, it seems. Whilst using warp travel to reach the quarry, Grizgutz and his warband unwittingly travel through time and emerge from the shifting case of Imperium shortly before they set off. So he basically goes through the warp to arrive where he wants to be, but arrives actually just before he actually leaves. Grizgutz then hunts down, what happens then, again, this is the only piece of accurate lore you can find, but I mean, you have two orc war bands just seeing each other, looking very confused, I guess, and you can imagine what happens. So they all smash each other, because that's what orcs do, and then Grizgutz sees himself, basically, and he hunts down and kills his doppelganger, reasoning that this way he can have a spare part or a spare of his favorite gun. So that's the whole idea. He travels accidentally back in time, sees himself, oh, this guy has my favorite gun, and that's why the noted kleptomaniac is very important. He just takes it. So, by killing him, obviously. And the resulting confusion obviously stops the war in its tracks, and yeah, that's why it's called the Lost War. So, yeah, that's the only official mentioning of Grizgutz in the canon. However, you can make a lot out of that. So, just to emphasize that again. So we have Grizgutz, again, we don't know how he looks like, on his ship, goes through the warp, basically, and this is the arrow of time, and we discuss whether there is an arrow of time in a second. He basically goes back into the warp back in time, sees basically the old Grizgutz, and just to the young Grizgutz basically. So here's the OG Grizgutz, the young Grizgutz. He sees it, and they fight. And the question is, does that work? That's from a physicist's point of view. And we have to get a bit deeper into physics, and I only give you two equations. And by doing that, of course you can ask yourself, is that a problem, like from a physics point of view? Because you get a lot of paradoxes, and the most notably is the so-called grandfather paradox. So I guess you all know it very simply. This is a very famous thing from Back to the Future, where you have Marty McFly, and I don't know whether you heard the sound, but they both turned their head when somebody from outside came and said, "Hey McFly." They both turned their head because this is Marty McFly and this is his father, but back in time. So this is the grandfather paradox. Basically, what happens if you kill your own grandfather when you go back in time? That means you cannot exist anymore. By not existing, you cannot go back in time. You cannot have killed your grandfather. You exist again, and you have created a loop. And we do exactly the same. It's just a grand awkward paradox. By killing the young Grizgutz, you basically kill the OG Grizgutz. You don't kill the young Grizgutz, and so on. Okay, but is that actually a problem? So let's talk a bit about time and physics, and we have to keep in mind, what is time actually? Is there actually a direction of time in physics? And is time actually a thing? So there was a huge discussion back in the day between Newton and Leibniz, 1600, whatever. Is time a mathematical property we just use to describe stuff, and it has no meaning in the real world? Or is time actually a real thing, like a table or so? So, long story short, time is actually a real thing, and we can change time. We can alter time. And now the question is, does time have a direction? And if you look at this video, this is just a standard billiard ball shot. However, until now, you didn't realize it's actually a wrong one. Because if you take classical mechanics, this, just from the equations, just from the way that it moves, is absolutely realistic. Nobody tells classical mechanics whether you go in this direction or this direction. I'm a theoretical physicist, so I can do whatever I want with my equations. Whenever there's a time, I just write a minus, and I'm done. And physics doesn't care. Classical mechanics is what we call time invariant. So it's basically, it doesn't care whether it's going in this direction or this direction. And just to show you the first equation, before we go to the equation, there's one thing we like very, very much in physics, and that's causality. So if, I don't have something, let's assume I take the mic and I drop it, I first have to open my hand and then it falls. If it first falls and then I open my hand, we have a problem. So that's causality. We like that very much for obvious reasons. So the one thing we have, and this is how basically physicists look at time, if you are here at the center, this is basically x, y, and z, time basically, x, y, and time. This is like the usual space, so like this direction, and time is going up in this diagram. If we move in time, we also can move in space, right? So I can just, by just walking, I move basically in this direction, and time goes in this direction, so I slowly move up. There is a maximum velocity, and the faster I go, the faster basically the more angle I get here, right? So if I go really fast, I have lots of x, space, and a bit of time. However, there is a maximum velocity I can have, which is the speed of light, which in this picture is like the blue line. So within this, basically, this cone, we call that the light cone, everything is fine, because I'm slower than the speed of light. If I go faster than the speed of light, so more x, more space in fewer time, and faster than the speed of light, then we have a problem, which is something we don't like. And that gives you also possibilities for time travel, and you leave causality. That's a problem. We don't like that. We want causality in physics. Because, I mean, mics dropping without hands opening is a bad thing. Because then we can basically, shut down physics. Because we don't know shit. So we want to always stay in that code. That's important. But so far that's not a problem. The other thing we have, the other thing we want to keep is so-called entropy. This is a very complex concept, which people usually call the chaos, the disorder of the system, which from a physical point of view is total bullshit, but it's right enough. So we keep it as right enough. What you can imagine is, you have like an aquarium. In that aquarium, you have like a sheet of glass or something. You have a yellow liquid and a blue liquid, and they're separated by that glass, right? What happens if you open the glass? They mix, exactly, and become a green liquid, because yellow and blue becomes green. Is there any process in the world, if you just wait long enough, that they will be separated again? No.
Like it's oil versus water and stuff like that?
Okay, yes, but that's then a different, I mean, they're the same fluids.
All right, yeah.
It's colored water.
Everything else is the same.
Yes, so, no, I mean, there is no, you will not just separate it. They will not, all the atoms from blue will go in this corner, all the atoms from yellow will go in this corner, it won't happen. It will stay in that equilibrium state, and that's it. And that's basically entropy maximizes, which interestingly gives you an error of time. Because the whole universe always goes in the state of more entropy. You always go in this example in the direction of green and not in the direction of separation, which is the whole point and gives you time, an error of time, which you can then put into equations and so on. So how can you check that? This is, you don't have to remember that. This is basically where we put the minus in front of the times and so on. This is a governing equation in physics, which is super simple and you can get everything from that equation. Then you have various things. Let's spend a bit of time on that. So what you can do with in physics, this is basically everything you need to know about physics. And there are three things you can change. The first thing you can change in your world is all the charges. You can take all the plus charges to all the and create minus charges. So whenever you have a plus charge, you have a minus charge. Does physics care? The answer is, and that's what's called C invariance, the answer is yes, physics cares. Okay, what you can do is, that's called P invariance. Whenever you go, you look to the right, you now look left. Does physics care? You can measure that. Yes, physics cares. However, like on a microscopic level, does physics care whether you change time? I mean, we know it cares on a grand universe level. We will always want to go into a direction green, but not into blue and yellow. So far, so good. But does it care like on a theoretical, actual level, on like individual particles? And this has been a problem for like 300 years or so. And just in 2012, there was a measurement. This is like the page. This is the first page of the author list, just to give you an impression of the experiment. This is a small experiment in particle physics. So it goes. The second page looks the same roughly. And this is like the best two, I think. No, it was a Barbard collaboration, which is a small size collaboration. So the larger ones have like 10 times that. So like 3,000 people working on one experiment and so on. So, but they measured actually certain particle decays, and that shows, yes, physics actually on a microscopic level cares about time. There is an error of time, which sucks for Grizgutz, because he cannot do stuff. He cannot get his copy of the favorite gun. So the last one standing, just to emphasize that. So we broke charge invariance, we broke parity invariance, as it's called. We broke time invariance. The only thing that nature still doesn't care about, if you have one universe and you copy it basically, and change all the charges. Plus is now minus and minus is now plus. You change left and right, and you change time from plus to minus. Then the universe is exactly the same. And nobody knows why. Which is quite funny. So, but this is like a small detour. So, the main point I want to make is physics cares about time, time has a direction. That's important, because that is bad for Grizgutz. The question now is, how do we do that again? And first we have to understand time in Warhammer, and especially time in Warhammer. Because if you look, and I checked not all of the sources, but a lot, has anybody an idea how time works in the war?
I don't think the warp knows how time works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So my favorite quote, and I was in a rabbit hole on Reddit yesterday. How does time work in the war? There was a question posed on Reddit. This was the answer. So and it goes all wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. And this is all I can say. To frame it slightly more professional, when you enter the war, you enter somewhere and somewhere, and you exit somewhere and somewhere. This is what and you have a roughly 10% control of what you do. So that's, yeah, okay, we leave physics here. So then also just, there's the first number in the imperial time which gives you like the rough accuracy of time. So how well do we know that this time is actually correct? Which gives you a lot of feeling for how does time in Warhammer work. When we have like an error bar as a first digit. Yeah. Okay, how does it work anyway? For Grizgutz, there's three options how it works. The first one, and that's an actual physical theory, which has lots of prominent proponents, multiverses. The idea of a multiverse theory is when Grizgutz actually enters the warp, and exits the warp, he basically copies Grizgutz. So there is now a universe with Grizgutz and another Grizgutz. However, whenever you take an action, so if I drop the mic or not, there's a universe where I drop the mic, but there's also a universe where I did not drop the mic. You can see how that escalates quite fast. So whenever you take a decision, you have lots and lots and lots of universes, which the current number, which has been estimated, is 10 to the 500, which is a very, very, very large number. And I see why people like this theory, because it solves a lot of problems, but it's like the God argument. So it's like in physics, we leave determinate. We don't know, we don't know it, we say, okay, it's in a different universe we can't see. Yeah, so then we can stop physics at all. So there's a very nice quote from Ranga Ramchari, he's the director of the Space Institute at UCLA. He said, very diplomatically, I might add, unusual claims like evidence for alternate universes require a very high burden of proof, which, makes a lot of sense. So, not very likely that this is the case. It's like, it's the God argument. Slightly more logical is a Novikov self-consistency principle, which sounds much harder than it actually is. What does it tell? It says, whatever you do in nature, you have closed time loops. So, in short, stuff happens because that's how it's supposed to happen. So yes, he was supposed to go back in time. That is actually on the arrow of time forward. And there's another prominent example. So again, he was always destined to. Another prominent example is a time turner in Harry Potter. I think the Prisoner of Azkaban or so. Which is basically, you go back in time because that's how it was always supposed to happen. Which is, from a physical point of view, absolutely, you can do that. Does anybody see a problem with that?
It's predestined.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You absolutely, you toss away free will. Whatever you do, the answer you just gave was in the books like millions of years ago. You didn't have a choice. You had to have the answer. So, do we like free will? Maybe. I like to think that we have it. Can I prove it? No. But from a physical point of view, you can have that theory. You have different problems, and like you toss away free will. And finally, you can have time loops, which is a quite interesting thing in physics. Since time is the thing you can actually change, and if you have like a huge mass, you basically bend time. It's called time dilation, the term. What you can do is let's assume you have a big black hole. Let's say this bottle here is a big black hole. I'll give you the number on the mass in a second. Time goes here, and it's really big. It gets bent around the black hole, comes here again, and goes back to the original time. You always go forward, but you arrive back in time when you actually started. Which is completely consistent with all the theories we know, like general relativity and so on. So you can write down the equations, you can solve them, it's fine. Whether that happens, nobody knows. Because what you need is like a mass of roughly 10 to the 11 solar masses, which is like 100 billion solar masses of our suns, and we haven't seen such a thing yet. However, you could do it. You could bend time basically around and arrive before you started, and everything is going forward all the time. There is one thing. Actually, this is a picture from the Hubble Space Telescope, and you might notice this funny structure here. This is called the Cosmic Horseshoe Galaxy. And just recently, like literally this year, it has been found out that there is a huge black hole in the middle of that. And what you see here is basically the light that is bent around this galaxy. Because light doesn't go straight around that, but basically shapes. And this is why, I mean, it's obvious why it's called cosmic horseshoe, but it's actually quite funny that this exists in the universe. However, this is like 3 to the 6 times 10 to the 10 solar masses, like 36 billion solar masses. We need like 3 of those in one place, and we could bend time, which is quite funny. And maybe somewhere in the universe, such a place exists. Who knows? Of course, when Grizgutz basically passes around this black hole, there are different problems. So don't try this at home. So yeah. So maybe there is just the most Warhammer-esque explanation for that. So we have like 3 physical explanations, but maybe there's a Warhammer-esque explanations. Orcs believe reality is what they think it is. And that's how the story of Warlord Grizgutz works. Thank you.